Hi there, our names are Maddie and Catherine, and we have been working on our resource for the English Assignment 2 together. We've developed a resource called Ninti Learning Together, which is visioned as a resource that provides easy access to information about how to weave Indigenous concepts and practices into the mainstream English classroom. So it's a platform for exchanging tips, texts and conversation about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, which, as we know, is a cross-curriculum priority. In Pitjantjatjara language, Ninti means education, and the phrase Ngapartji means you give me something, I give you something. We decided to name the resource Ninti Learning Together because it represents coexistence and conveys very simply the willingness to understand something which may at first seem daunting and foreign. The resource has been targeted towards Year 8 English teachers, but it could potentially be adapted to suit other modes and audiences. At present, visitors to Ninti Learning Together may only engage with discussion via blog comment sections or contribute a post to the website if they email their submission to the address provided on the About page on the blog. As website managers, this simplifies our moderation process because we're able to screen content as it's submitted. However, we feel this resource will be best put to use if people can access it and engage with the content at their own leisure. Ideally, each user would eventually have their own login details and profile page to which they could add bookmarked texts and posts written by other users for future reference. They could also send personal messages to other users to facilitate the exchange of complex ideas and promote further discussion. Additionally, there would be a student login portal where students may access notes about texts they're studying. We believe it's important to implement a long-term vision for this resource, given that sustainability is key to solidifying connections between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. So, although the resource at present is little more than a website with blog posts, comment sections and an email address for submissions or inquiries, our intention in creating this resource is to foster change and growth and to improve the discussion about Aboriginal history and culture. Here, teachers have access to information about materials written by both Indigenous and non-Indigenous creatives. Although texts and analyses vary in type, context and style, each one outlines how themes of home, place and spirituality are conveyed. Teaching these concepts, which commonly appear in mainstream literature and film, through the lens of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, helps students to understand the relevance of Indigenous beliefs in contemporary society and also outside of HAS frameworks. We acknowledge that many texts by, for and about Indigenous Australians are rich works of literature, yet as this is a CCP, it's important to explore how Indigenous beliefs, ideas and concepts can be subtly introduced into classroom teaching. This needn't be challenging in English classrooms as the aforementioned themes are found in texts around the world. For example, Isabel Allende's Eva Luna, which tells the story of an orphaned South American girl, could be used on the website because although the text is not explicitly linked to Australian Aboriginality, it is essentially about being Aboriginal, about yearning to find one's roots and sense of belonging, which, as we know, is a constant struggle for Indigenous Australians. In the English classroom, a teacher could easily access our resource and find details about how to weave this CCP into their lesson on Eva Luna, if that was the class text, for example. Ninti Learning Together also features film analyses, as visual art is a large component of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander storytelling. Films such as Storm Boy, One Night the Moon and The Rabbit Proof Fence explore connection to land, home, spirit and culture without whitewashing Australia's turbulent past. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures is rather a difficult cross-curriculum priority to incorporate, especially if the teacher has limited understanding of Indigenous cultures. Ninti Learning Together helps teachers build a framework for lesson planning and helps to further develop their personal knowledge as well. It enables discussion and sharing, which in turn will promote consistent pedagogical approaches to incorporating this CCP. Here, I'm going to show you a particular example of one text analysis on the website which provides a synopsis, rationale, how it addresses the CCP organising ideas, and also provides an example lesson plan and links to further resources. So the text that we've used as our initial outline could be a film study, and it's called One Night the Moon, which was a made-for-television movie released in 2001 and directed by Rachel Perkins. It's actually based on the true story of Indigenous tracker Alexander Riley and is set against the incredible backdrop of the Flinders Ranges region in South Australia. And it tells the story of a non-Indigenous couple living on a station on Andyamatana land who paid the ultimate price for their ignorance and ill treatment of this tracker. So one night, hence the title, their young daughter, who was enticed by the beautiful full moon, decided she would climb through her bedroom window to chase it. And she ran into the wilderness, unsupervised and unaccounted for. So when her parents realised in the morning that she was gone, they panicked and obviously called the police force, who sought the help of an Indigenous tracker that was employed by the force. Yet when he turned up on the land, the girl Emily's father made it very clear that he wasn't welcome and that he was not to be on the land involved in the search. So what happened after that was these non-Indigenous police officers and the girl's father were roaming the land for weeks, searching and were unable to find Emily. So the girl's distressed mother, Rose, eventually decided she'd go off on her own accord and find Albert, the tracker, and she set off with him one night to find where the daughter was, and it turned out that she had sadly passed away, and the tracker found the girl's body within a very short time, and he determined that she indeed had followed the moon. One Night the Moon is also a significant text that could be used as a film study for this CCP because it's a musical, and song really is the bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous characters in the film, because although they have very different opinions and are seen very much as being on two different sides of the story, they all sing. Pretty much every character in the film sings, and it's the way that the story is told which we know is historical and symbolic, because it's Perkins' way of paying tribute to Indigenous culture and the way that songlines are integral to Indigenous history and remain relevant today. It's a very haunting film which highlights the need for reconciliation without overlooking a dark time in Australian history. It's really good to use for a text study because it's actually not a very long film. It's 54 minutes roughly in length. So you could look at this film in a double lesson and still have time to discuss it rigorously with the class and to explain anything that the students may not understand, or to commence a discussion on the techniques used by the filmmakers to really convey an important message. And it is a highly symbolic film. It makes use of lots of flashbacks and camera angles and different contrasts and juxtaposition of scenes, and it's quite a compelling film study in that way. But it also importantly meets many of the CCP organising ideas, which you can find a list of here on Ninti Ngapartji. For instance, the organising ideas for this particular CCP are country and place, culture and people, and you can see here extensive lists and descriptions of where exactly in the film you can find this being addressed. And then below this you can also find an example lesson plan, which obviously you wouldn't need to necessarily use and you can adapt, but if the author of the post chooses to, they can share something that they might bring into their own classroom, and the aims of the lessons, the procedures with times, And also something we would like to encourage contributors to do is to seek out other ideas and theories from different educators, just to provide some context and some backing to what it is that they've written, and also obviously to provide a detailed list of references. So this is just one example of a text that could be used, and making use of the medium of this website as well is important. So at the top we've got here a video of one of the scenes, and throughout there are links to a number of scenes which can be found online via YouTube, to scenes in the movie that are important. So when you're planning your lessons, instead of having to go and search through the film yourself and find the appropriate timings, it's already provided for you. So this is obviously just a very skeletal version of the website at this point, and we think that there'd be room, as I mentioned before, to contribute significant other details and to open it up eventually to students to incorporate them in the discussion about what they want to hear. Because the reason that we decided to address Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures is because each of us who've been working on this have had extensive experience in our adult lives working with Indigenous students in the Northern Territory and Northwest South Australia. But we each agreed that our knowledge of Australian history didn't really extend far beyond the first settlers, especially during our primary years, and that introducing students to stories about and by and for Indigenous people early on is the key to helping them to develop empathy. And education is one way for us to reconcile with our past, and through telling, reading, listening to and viewing the experiences of Indigenous Australians, we can better understand their culture and move in the direction of reconciliation.